Miles O'Brien, live from the Kennedy Space Center.
It is a beautiful day here at the Kennedy Space Center. You see some white puffy clouds that have only recently developed. The weather not going to be an issue here. We're told it's only a 10% chance that weather, in fact, will be the fly in the ointment today. Safe to say that's being conservative. The weather not the issue. As so far, we have had a countdown that has been amazingly free of trouble. As the Space Shuttle Discovery sits on the pad, its crew of 7 ready to fly for the first time in 2.5 years, since February 1st, 2003, when the crew of Columbia and her crew of 7 were lost. Take a look at the scene out there. As you see right now, barely a cloud in the sky. The countdown began several days ago. The fueling in the overnight hours, about 1 a.m. local time, 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen now in that orange fuel tank. And those fuel sensors that had been giving such great difficulty and caused this 13-day delay after the first attempt, causing not a single problem so far in this countdown. Truthfully, some engineers kind of had hoped that they would see the same sorts of problems they saw before, predicted problems, because it would give them some insight into what is causing it. It remains unexplained, but since the sensors are working, right now we're go for launch. There will be one more test, and we'll be listening very closely for that test. We're now in the final hold, which is about a 40-minute hold, now about 30 minutes left in it, before the so-called terminal count, the last 9 minutes of the countdown, where computers take over because events move so quickly and decisions had to be made so quickly as to whether to launch or not. Joining me now and with us throughout the entire hour is shuttle astronaut Jim Riley, who's had a lot of experience on this. Just briefly, before we get into some more detail, this countdown has gone pretty much without a hitch.
Absolutely. Everything's doing very well. In fact, they're doing the polls and going through everything in launch control right now, and everything sounds great.
Let's talk about that technical issue, if you would. Let me borrow that sensor. This is the focus of a lot of attention right here. This is one part of this fuel sensor system that was the focus of that attention that caused that scrub on July 13th. Question that engineers have had ever since then is it the sensor itself? Is it the wires that are attached? Is it the black boxes that were connected to it? They came up with a scheme of identifying, you see where the sensor is located at the base of that external fuel tank, there to determine when liquid hydrogen is there or not, to ensure that the engines are not cut off prematurely, or worse yet, drain dry, which could cause a catastrophic problem. Well, so far these sensors, the wires, the black boxes, the system have worked without a hitch. NASA has no further insights into the problem that caused all this delay, but nevertheless, they are go for launch. Let's bring in my colleague, CNN's Lou Dobbs, who is the founder and CEO of Space.com, author of the book Space. Yesterday, Lou, you were talking to the NASA Administrator, Mike Griffin, and you asked some of the same questions we've all been asking. Why would you eliminate a layer of redundancy, potentially, on the ground before liftoff?
In Michael Griffin, Miles, as you said, he's straightforward about this. The national press made much of the fact that they have decided to launch, even if there is a problem with the eco sensor, the fuel sensor, one of 4. But what many people did not understand, and NASA has explained with, I think, considerable openness and elaboration, is these 4 sensors at one time were wired as dual sensors, so that you had to have a backup. But now the team has taken, the mission management team has taken note of the fact that all 4 sensors are individually wired. So you have, even with the failure of one, further redundancy. And they have not been able, as you have reported, to emulate the problem or replicate it, and feel very comfortable that at least in this area of the fuel sensors, which delayed the launch originally of Discovery, it is not an issue for this launch at all. In fact, they have double redundancy.
And that is the good news, Lou Dobbs. We'll get back to you in a little bit. The interesting irony is here, the engineers, as they say, would actually have preferred, in a sense, to see the problem crop up so they could focus on it, but nevertheless, they'll take what they've got here. Let's talk a little bit about the weather. While it isn't a factor right now, just to give you a sense of some of the issues involved here, I want to walk through some of the rules. It is a big, thick book, really, of weather rules that NASA has to live by. For example, heat. Over 99 degrees for more than 30 minutes, no flight. 35 degrees or colder, no flight. That harkens back to the days of Challenger on that very cold morning in January of 1986. Other issues that you have to contend with: wind. A 17-knot crosswind at the Shuttle landing facility is a limit. We have no problem with that today. It's breezy and fine. That's in the event that they had an abort scenario, which forces them to return to the Shuttle landing facility, the 15,000-foot runway not far from where I stand, in about 20 minutes' time after launch. Now, precipitation. Here's the interesting thing. This is a vehicle that can travel many times faster than a speeding bullet, Mach 25, and yet it can't fly through simple raindrops for fear of causing damage to that thermal heat shield, which we've all become familiar with in the wake of the loss of Columbia. Lightning. No issue with lightning today that we can tell you about, but if there were, this has very strict rules. If it's detected within 10 nautical miles of the pad or in that planned flight path within 30 minutes prior to launch, there would be no launch. Finally, clouds. Going back to that issue of precipitation, any cloud that is 4,500 feet thick, some temperature parameters there, cumulus clouds, the shuttle doesn't fly through it. That's just a little sample of some of the rules that they abide by. We're joined now by CNN's Chad Myers, who's in the Weather Center. He's been watching the weather for us all day. And quite frankly, Chad, not much to watch.
It's been really good, Miles. The clouds that you were pointing out about 15 minutes ago, that is the sea breeze. Sea breeze kind of reacts a little bit different than the land breeze. They blow in opposite directions and at opposite times of the day. When the sun heats up the land, it heats it up quicker than the water. This may get to be 95. The water still stays about 80, 85. This air wants to rise, and then the air rushes back in from the ocean. And that line of clouds that you see, especially in the early morning and early afternoon, all part of what we call the sea breeze. We're going to zoom right into Melbourne for you right here. There is not a cloud in the sky. There is not a raindrop on the map, and there hasn't been any lightning at all in Florida. Quite the scenario for you. Really very, very good weather. And in fact, no clouds even within 10 miles. The likelihood 80 or to 90%. The temperature right now is 84, and the shuttle is on its way up, I think. We're not going to cancel it because of weather today. And this launch window, Miles, of at 10 to 11 o'clock, 10:39 officially, right? That's a much better time than the one we had a couple of weeks ago in the late afternoon when it was really getting heaty, getting hot out there, and we were really starting to see those cumulus clouds puff up.
Yeah, each day they delayed, they picked up about 20 minutes earlier in the day because of the way the rendezvous goes to the space station. And truthfully, 13 days was probably good because it puts them right in the middle of this mid-morning, Chad, as you point out, which is a lot more favorable in Florida in the summertime. Let's talk about the crew. Who's on board this shuttle? Who are the people who are willing to take this flight and take these risks 2.5 years after the loss of Columbia? They do it willingly, they do it with bravery, they do it because they believe very strongly in the mission of human beings in space. Eileen Collins, the commander, her 4th flight from Elmira, New York. She was the first woman to command a space shuttle, July of 1999. First woman pilot in 97. In the Air Force, she scored several firsts as well because wherever she's gone, she's been first. So she's very comfortable being the first after the Columbia disaster. James Vegas Kelly is the pilot sitting in the right seat beside her. It's his 2nd flight. He hails from Burlington, Iowa. He's also an Air Force guy. 4 children at home. Once again, heartily endorses the risks and is willing to take those risks in spite of the fact that certainly he leaves a jittery family behind him this morning. Next on the mission, Steve Robinson, mission specialist. It's his 3rd flight. He flew with John Glenn back in 1998, and October of 1998, on this very same space shuttle orbiter, the Discovery. Hails from California. He's in the astronaut rock band called Max Q. This morning, as we saw him, he was playing guitar for his fellow crew members. Presumably, they enjoyed the strumming. Next on the crew for us is Charlie Camarda. He's the only astronaut I know from the Queens, that's for sure. He is on his 1st flight. Interesting guy, an engineer with 7 patents who spent many years working at NASA's Ames Research Laboratory. Comes to the astronaut car with a little different career pedigree and a little different attitude, and certainly has brought a lot to this crew. Next member on the crew, also strapped in and ready today, Wendy Lawrence. She's on her 4th flight. She would have flown to the space station Mir, but she's too small to fit in the spacewalking suit, the Russian Orlan suit. That's why they call her Too Small Lawrence. She hails from Alexandria, Virginia. She's a Navy captain, and she is the daughter of a very famous naval aviator and ultimately a commandant of the Naval Academy at Annapolis. Actually, her father was a contemporary of John Glenn in the Mercury 7 and might very well have been an astronaut himself. So she has a big legend to follow there. Next on our flight is Soichi Noguchi. He's a mission specialist from Japan. It is his first flight. He will do 3 spacewalks along with Steve Robinson. We'll tell you about those spacewalks in just a little while and what they're all about. But basically what they're doing, among other things, is testing ways to repair the heat shield in space. New ideas, perhaps sort of a high-tech Bondo kind of setup. Andy Thomas is the most experienced of the crew. It's his 4th flight. He hails from South Australia. Spent 141 days aboard the Mir space station back in the days when U.S. astronauts were aboard Mir and when Mir still existed. While everybody else on this crew counts their time in hours, he counts it in days. And let's take you to the firing room and just show you what's going on there. I'm going to bring in Jim Riley, our astronaut, who's been listening very intently to the calls there. It almost looks routine. It almost looks matter-of-fact in there. And I know they drill these things over and over again, but there's got to be a little different feeling in that launch control center right now, Jim.
You know, everybody's looking really tightly at their screens just to making sure that everything is perfect for this first flight in 2.5 years. So I'm sure they're very carefully looking at what they got. Looking
tightly, focused intently. Clearly that sensor issue is on everybody's mind. We're in the time frame soon where there'll be another test. When is that coming up, and do we know how critical that particular test will be?
Exactly. In fact, before we come out of this hold, they're going to do one final test of this last set of eco sensors. So they're going to be looking at it and setting it to the dry state, which has passed perfectly all morning long, ever since about 3 o'clock this morning. And they'll try it one more time before they get the final go for a launch from the NTD.
So conceivably, if there's a problem that crops up at this late juncture, there could be a problem. Might necessitate a scrub, but there's no reason to believe at this point that those sensors are not operating properly.
So far this morning, everything has worked perfectly. No issues at all.
Tell us a little bit about this crew. This crew has had, some of the crew have been together for more than 4 years. They were brought together. There was a bit of a reshuffle after Columbia, but some of them have been training for 4 years. What's it like to train for 4 years for a moment like this?
I've never done it, but I can imagine that they are very tired of training and ready to go to space.
Now, here we are in the photo opportunity, which happened early this morning, the wee hours. We're not sure about the sartorial selection of Hawaiian shirts. Maybe you have some insights as to why they went that way.
Well, your crew breakfast is a routine where you wear a crew shirt and everybody's dressed alike, and obviously they were in a celebratory mood and ready to go today.
All right, and below that banner, you can barely see it as a cake, and there's Steve Robinson strumming that guitar for them. I'm not sure what he was singing or playing, but I've never seen anybody actually eat that cake. Have you eaten it?
Yeah, actually, when we come back after flight, they'll save it for us and they'll freeze it, and we eat it when we get back.
Now the walkout, of course, that's part of the whole ritual here. As you walk out and go off into the Astrovan, is there much conversation among the crew members in the Astrovan, or is that just kind of quiet time?
It depends on the crew, but both of the crews that I've flown with, we were pretty talkative on both situations when we were going out. That's the one time when you've got a little time to just kind of be yourselves and talk to your friends.
Well, it gets down to a point where you have, I guess in a sense, less to do at any given moment, right? You have fewer distractions, I guess,
exactly
the way to describe it. So you ultimately you make your way up to the 195-foot level. They call this the white room because it's painted white. The closeout crew gets you in there, and that whole process of strapping in, something you do time and again in simulations and so forth, it's still got to be different on launch day. It's like going into the big game, isn't it?
It really is. No matter how many times you've simmed this kind of an event, there's nothing like the day you're going to go do it for real. And so these guys will be focused very tightly on their job that's coming up with, leading into the launch, and of course in the launch sequence itself. But the guys, particularly on the middeck, are thinking about what happens as soon as you get to orbit, because they're going to be very busy for the next 2 hours after that.
All right, Jim Riley will stay with us. We're going to take a break. So far, we haven't heard anybody say no-go for launch. The poll has been successful thus far as they go through all those various positions, people focused on those screens. When we return, we'll talk a little bit about what happened 2.5 years ago, Columbia, and what has happened since. How this shuttle is in so many respects very different than the one that took off here in January 2 years ago. Stay with us.
I have never had any pressure from my family to not fly this mission. My parents, my husband, my children, my friends, You know, I would think that I would have, but I haven't. Having said that, I have asked myself, do I really want to fly this mission many times? And the answer always came back, yes.
Closed captioning hours on CNN, sponsored in part by Post, whole grain experts for over 100 years.
Where can you get a whole day's worth of whole grain in just one bowl? Post shredded wheat, 100% whole grain.
I'm an AmeriQuest mortgage specialist, and whether your dream is to buy a home, refinance, or see the Rolling Stones, I'm here to help. That's why we're sponsoring the Rolling Stones tour. I love you. For your chance to win tickets, go to AmeriQuest.com. AmeriQuest Mortgage, proud sponsor of the American dream.
Why do I use Neosporin? I've got my reasons.
And now there's another. A study shows Neosporin ointment kills more types of infectious bacteria than even the leading prescription and helps cuts heal 4 days faster than a bandage alone.
How many more reasons do I need?
So many cuts and scrapes. Only one Neosporin. Every cut, every time.
What are you doing?
Shopping and comparing before I buy.
Shop and compare before. That's it.
Introducing the new Priceline. Now you can shop and compare airfare before you buy. Actually choose your exact flights, times, airline, or still name your own price and save even more. The new all-in-one Priceline. Shop, compare, save.
CNN Tonight. Jeff Corwin risking his life to put the wild in Wildlife TV.
Try to carefully.
Larry King Live. CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Think you can't get high-speed internet at your house? Feel like you're stuck with dial-up internet? Think again. Directway is high-speed internet by satellite, a super-fast instant connection that's available anywhere in the continental U.S. All you need is a clear view of the southern sky. Directway works with your PC or Mac for faster connections, faster downloads, faster surf speeds, faster everything. There's no software to install, and Directway doesn't use a phone line, so no more dialing in, no more missed calls, no need to spring for that extra line. People, it's time you get the high-speed option you really want. Call 1-866-GET-DWAY or visit getdway.com and get Directway at your house. It's a no-brainer. Directway, the super fast instant internet connection that doesn't use a phone line or care where you live. Free yourself. Get Directway. Call 1-866-GET-DWAY or visit getdway.com now and get high-speed satellite internet. The choice is yours, and you deserve it.
American Morning, where real news makes the difference. CNN tomorrow starts 7 a.m. Eastern.
Last time I was here was January of 2003, and the space shuttle on the launch pad, same one as a matter of fact, was the Space Shuttle Columbia. 16 days later, of course, we lost Columbia and her crew of 7. During that launch, we didn't know right away what happened. There was the crew as they came out. That familiar scene you just saw here a few moments ago with the crew that is currently on board the Space Shuttle Discovery. But a little more than a minute after liftoff here, a piece of foam, about 2 pounds in weight, about the size of a briefcase, fell off, striking the leading edge of the wing. And 16 days later, this was the scene that we saw over the skies of Texas as it re-entered. It created a lethal hole in that heat shield on the leading edge of the wing, and the shuttle broke up, was destroyed in the 3,000-degree heat of re-entry. It's left an amazing emotional trail behind it for the family members, for the NASA family, for people who feel strongly about space exploration. Not long ago, I spoke with Dr. John Clark, who is a NASA flight surgeon and who lost his wife, Laurel, aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. Listen to what he had to say.
I would have traded for my wife in a heartbeat, even at the last second and the vehicle finally broke up, I mean, I would have much rather had me lose my life than have her lose it. But sometimes we have to face our worst fears. Her worst fear in life would be to lose her, you know, not be there for her son. My worst fear would be to be a single parent, and both of those fears were materialized.
John Clark talking about his worst fears, Laurel Clark's worst fears, and there was the crew that we lost on that day. The crew today will be carrying a patch to remember the Columbia 7, and they will spend a couple of moments in space taking time to remember them. And their commemorative patch, as a matter of fact, if you look at the top there, is symbolic of Columbia and her crew, the 7 stars, symbolic of the lost souls on that mission, February 1st, 2003. NASA has had to recover emotionally and also has had to do a lot of good, hard technological and engineering work in order to get to this point today. We can talk a little bit in just a moment about how they've changed the way they make decisions, which were, in fact, kind of the root cause of the Columbia disaster. But there are some key things to point out just in how they have changed the orbiter and the space shuttle system in general. First of all, let's take a look at a sort of a God's eye view of where we sit right now, if we could. We'll just give you a sense of where we are. We're right in this area right over here. About 3.5 miles away is Launch Pad 39B. Let's zoom in and we'll show you what's changed on the Space Shuttle Discovery, and for that matter on all space shuttles to follow over the next few years. Inside the leading edge of the wing, there's a series of sensors that have been put in here which would detect a strike, would actually feel the motion of a strike if something were to hit that fragile area there. And in addition, would be able to tell them if there was a breach, which could cause a problem with the heat shield on reentry. Let's go to the next improvement. There are a total of 50 major technological engineering improvements. This is where the foam came off, the spot where the foam came off from Columbia. It's called the bipod area. You can see why they call it the bipod. That's what attaches the orbiter to the fuel tank. They removed the offending piece of foam, which was right in here, and instead made it safe from ice buildup by putting in heaters. So a big place, a big source of the foam has been removed. Let's go to another improvement which has been made. All kinds of improvements on the photo documentation, including a camera put in this so-called drip shield. There's more than 100 cameras trained on the orbiter, some of them on board, many of them on the ground, tracking capability in order to get a good sense if there's any sort of damage during launch. Next location on the orbiter where there was an improvement made, we take you back to the payload bay. What you're seeing here is the orbital boom. That's not new, but there's an extension to it, a 50-foot extension. It allows that boom to go out and actually look beneath the belly of the space shuttle while in orbit, so they can do a comprehensive photographic survey of the leading edge of the wing and those thermal tiles to make sure there are no problems there. That'll be in the first couple of days of the mission, as well as while they're on the space station. Up here, exploding bolts have been given collectors so they won't fall off and cause a debris problem. Next location there is the crew itself. They've been trained. They will be testing ways to actually repair tiles and those leading edge panels in space. Finally, if worse comes to worse, they have the docking capability at the International Space Station. They can wait literally for a rescue mission, which was not an option during the Space Shuttle Columbia. But as we said, aside from those technical issues, there are many fundamental issues that need to be addressed. I'm joined now once again by Lou Dobbs. Also joining us is Lori Garver, a former associate administrator with NASA. Lou, let's begin with you and talk about NASA's culture. That's the term that has been used so much. Do you have a sense of how well the agency is making decisions, and if they're communicating in a way that would not allow problems like that foam striking the orbiter to be papered over?
The Columbia Accident Investigation Board, as you know, they basically demanded that kind of ossified response that was representative of the bureaucracy, frankly, of NASA. I don't know if Lori is going to appreciate this, but it was what was happening at the time. Engineers afraid to push through the chain of command. There were too many layers, and that was identified as well by the Columbia Board. The fact is that, as an old friend of mine, Walter Wriston. Yes.
Could I interrupt you? We got the poll going here just for a moment. Let's listen to the poll as they go through and see who's go for launch. Let's listen.
Answer is go. You have range clear launch. Copy. And CDR. crew is go.
Copy that. And launch director, the launch team is ready to proceed.
Copy that, NTD. Thank you very much. Chief engineer, verify no constraints to launch.
My engineering team is ready to go.
Thank you, Charlie. KC safety and mission assurance.
KSC SMA is go.
Thank you, Steve. Payload launch manager.
Mike, the ISS ground processing team is ready to go.
Thank you, Bill. Range weather.
Weather has no constraints to launch.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Ops manager.
The mission management team is working no problems. We are go for launch.
Thank you, sir. Discovery launch director.
Discovery's here, go ahead.
Okay, Eileen, our long wait may be over. And so on behalf of the many millions of people who believe so deeply in what we do, good luck, Godspeed, and have a little fun up there.
And thanks to you, to the launch team, and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Copy that, thanks. NTD, you are clear to proceed with this launch.
Copy, thank you. Shuttle launch director Mike Leinbach going through the poll. Everybody go for launch. You heard the mission management team. Those are the senior managers. Wayne Hale saying go for launch. And then the CDR, the commander, Eileen Collins, speaking on behalf of the crew. They're a long wait over, as he put it. Lori Garver, every time I hear that, I get a few butterflies. How about you?
That's right, absolutely. This crew has been waiting such a long time, but other crews, every time we launch the space shuttle, recognize 2.5 million parts on the space shuttle. It is a risky vehicle, and they're putting a lot at stake for our nation's space program.
All right, we're going to talk more about that. We'll talk more about how NASA has changed its way of doing business with Lou Dobbs and Lori Garver. And we'll bring in Jim Riley and get an update on where this countdown is. As best we can tell, not a single problem. As a matter of fact, we were told in the break just a moment ago that final fuel sensor test passed with flying colors. It appears we are headed toward a launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery, a return to flight for the Space Shuttle program in just about 15 minutes' time. Back with more in a moment.
There's nothing like, at the end of a day on orbit, getting perhaps a drink of coffee or tea or something or juice, and floating over to a window and just having a quiet time, looking out the window as the Earth slowly rotates under you, seeing familiar sights, wondering what those people way, way, way down there are actually doing while you're flying over, and just enjoying the serenity of that moment. It is truly unique, and I'm looking forward to that.
When you book a room on Ramada.com, you'll get our best rate in seconds. Of course, you could search the web endlessly for a lower rate, but just think of all you'd be missing out on. Ramada.com. It's as easy as...
Americans have questions about their retirement. Will their employer offer a good retirement plan? Can they count on Social Security? Will their savings last so they can enjoy a comfortable and independent retirement?
Life insurers have the answers Americans need. Our products provide financial protection, long-term savings, and guarantee an income you can't outlive. That's retirement security. America's life insurers, for 200 years protecting your financial and retirement security for life.
Will you spend your retirement sitting in a comfy chair, watching the world go by? Or will you be out there with your sleeves rolled up, changing the very shape of it, saying, "Hello, future"? Call your advisor about the powerful resources of Lincoln Financial Group.
What are you doing? I just got a new home loan from Ditech.com and paid off all my credit cards.
Consolidate bills with Ditech's flat fee home loan. The total lender fee is just $395. Call 1-800-65-DITECH.
Once, a great night's sleep was easy to catch, but now it seems so fleeting. Your restless mind keeps chasing sleep away.
I've got to pay those bills. Did I call the electrician? Why did I promise I'd go tomorrow?
Introducing Lunesta, a sleep aid that can give you and your restless mind the sleep you need. Lunesta helps most people sleep all through the night and works quickly, so take it right before bed. And Lunesta is non-narcotic and the only prescription sleep aid approved for long-term use. Of course, do not use sleep medicines for extended periods without first talking to your doctor. Be sure you have at least 8 hours to devote to sleep before becoming active. Until you know how you'll react to Lunesta, you should not drive or operate machinery. Avoid taking Lunesta with alcohol. All sleep medicines carry some risk of dependency. Side effects may include unpleasant taste, headache, drowsiness, and dizziness. Ready to catch a great night's sleep? Just climb into bed and leave the rest to Lunesta.
CNN Primetime takes you beyond the headlines. Go to the places, meet the people, question the newsmakers, get the real story. News, not just talk. CNN Primetime. It's essential. 7 Eastern.
It's now 8 minutes and 18 seconds until the intended launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery. I'm Miles O'Brien, live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, welcoming our viewers all around the world as we share in this moment, this tense moment. 2.5 years after the loss of Columbia and her crew, NASA poised to return the Space Shuttle fleet to flight. We are inside what is known as Terminal Count. I'm joined by astronaut Jim Riley. And in essence, Terminal Count is what it sounds like, the final countdown, and a very important time where things happen very rapidly, Jim.
Exactly. In fact, now what they're going to be doing is going through the APU hydraulic start, with which Jim Kelly will be doing.
That's the auxiliary power unit you're referring to, which powers the shuttle, provides electricity on key points when it's on launch and landing.
Absolutely. It controls the aero surfaces, the flaps on the vehicle, as well as some of the other equipment. And they're also going to be connecting the fuel cells so that we'll get onboard power to Discovery at that point.
And you're seeing the First Lady who has joined this launch. She's not far from where we are in the VIP viewing area. And the governor as well, her brother-in-law, here for this launch on this beautiful sunny day. And if you look out at the launch pad, that shot we've been showing you, that white room, you see what amounts to a jetway being swung away. It's only, in this case, it's a shuttleway, I guess. Having buttoned up that shuttle, the crew hatch is sealed, the crew buttoned up, everybody go for launch. And the countdown is at its point now with about 6 minutes, 45 seconds to go. One of the things that they're thinking about at all times, Jim, are the series of abort scenarios. I want to show some quick animations while we listen to this launch to show what the crew could contend with. If you lost an engine or two very early on, there is a scenario called return to launch site, which would actually put the space shuttle back on the ground here in about 20 minutes after launch. Tell us how that would unfold.
If we were to lose an engine at the critical phase just coming off the pad, then we wouldn't have enough energy to get us across the ocean. So the abort profile then would just be to fly backwards and slow down and then drop back into the atmosphere and then start a return back to Kennedy Space Center to land out at the shuttle landing facility out here.
Flying backwards, supersonic into your own plume. Sounds like something you don't want to try.
Not unless we absolutely have to.
Yeah, all right, that's if you lose engines very early on or a couple of engines. And what happens is as we get closer to this ascent, this 8.5-minute ride to space, each milestone of altitude and speed, the crew is making a decision as to what the abort scenario would be. They're sort of spring-loaded for whatever abort they can pull off at any given moment. The next one would be sort of a transatlantic abort. Essentially, they have enough speed if they lose an engine at this point to make it to Spain or France and get across the ocean. Explain how that would unfold.
Exactly, and once we get to a point where we've got enough velocity to cross the ocean, then we will then pick our abort sites to be either Zaragoza, Moron, or Le Toubs in France, where the orbiter could re-enter the atmosphere and land at any of those 3 sites.
Once again, none of these have ever been done. 2 sites in Spain, 1 in France. And then there is one abort that actually has occurred back in the pre-Challenger days. A main engine shut down kind of early on the ascent. It's called abort to orbit. Abort to orbit meaning they can achieve an orbit, but perhaps not the altitude you suspected. In other words, as you get higher, have more velocity, if you lost an engine there, you still might be able to achieve a space orbit.
Absolutely. In fact, that is, as you mentioned, the only abort we've ever had in the Space Shuttle program, and that was an abort to orbit case, where you had enough performance to make it to orbit, but as soon as you get to orbit, you'll have to do an orbital maneuvering system burn to circularize your orbit and raise your altitude high enough.
Possible, though, in that case, you might not have enough altitude to make it to the space station, but that's a scenario that certainly seems remote at this point, given the fact that the shuttle seems to be working so well. One other one, they call it abort once around. What is that? What kind of a situation does that involve?
If we had a system failure, something critical that looked like we wouldn't be able to stay safely on orbit, then that is an option where we would then just do one single orbit of the Earth and then return back to the landing site right here at Kennedy Space Center.
All right, so that could, after 90 minutes, mean the shuttle would arrive back here. Those are the things that are on the minds of the crew. They spend all their time in simulators practicing for these sorts of things. We are now at the inside the 4-minute point. What's going on in the countdown right now, Jim?
Right now what they've done is they're getting ready for the APU starts, and they'll be doing that very quickly. They're going to now go to the inertial measurement units on board, which will be the navigation controls. The main engines are gimbaling right now, so they're getting they can actually feel that inside on the flight deck.
When you say gimbaling, you're seeing it here happen right now. The engines actually have directable thrust, and when you say gimbal, they're just moving them around to make sure they work properly, right?
Right. Now that the hydraulic systems are active, they can gimbal the engines, and they're doing the final check of the engines to make sure that they can gimbal through all their motion. And you can feel that as a slight swaying on board the shuttle.
Now, coming up, we're going to see they're going to do some pressurization to that oxygen tank, sort of get it buttoned up. Are they past the point where they're constantly replenishing the fuel?
They'll be doing it just right up to the very end, just at the last few minutes, but they're in basically just a sustaining mode right at this point. As soon as they remove the beanie cap, if you will, then it will be completely buttoned up and on its own.
That beanie cap, if you look at the top there of that picture that you see right there, right at the pointy end of the orange external fuel tank, I think the technical term is the gaseous oxygen vent hood, but I appreciate you using the layperson's term. What a switch here. I'm doing the NASA vernacular. Basically, that takes excess oxygen gas, there it goes, from forming near the top. That can pose an ice and debris problem there. Once that is removed, we're getting down to the final moments and getting inside the point of 3 minutes. Now, the fuel cell startup, where they kind of go internal, fuel cells are what power the orbiter while on orbit. That's an important milestone as well.
That's true. And what that'll do is that will be the onboard power supply now. And the crew has now gotten the clearance to close and lock their visors and do their last buttons up for what they're going to be wearing when they go to space.
Now, one new thing here is the deactivation of the bipod heaters. We talked a little while ago about how there are heaters where there used to be foam in the bipods. They turned them off right before launch.
Yep, and that's true. In fact, they just did that. They just turned off the bipod heaters, and they've been on so that to preclude any ice formation where that foam has been removed. And now they've been taken off so that we're going to 1 minute and 30 seconds left to go.
1 minute and 30 seconds to go. There are heaters as well in the solid rocket boosters that will be deactivated in the next 20 seconds or so. And then at 50 seconds, an important point, transferring to internal power. In other words, the shuttle is no longer tied to the shore, so to speak.
Exactly. It'll have its own onboard power available at that point. And the real critical moment is at 31 seconds, and that's the transition to the onboard.
Rocket booster joint heaters now being deactivated.
At 31 seconds, the ground launch sequencer goes into auto sequence. As you see the crowd gathering here. Beneath the countdown clock, the flags limp, the weather perfect, the shuttle apparently the same. Let's listen to NASA's George Diller and the radio calls
booster flight data recorders
between
activated.
Mission Control, Launch Control, and the Space Shuttle Discovery.
Standing by for the handoff to Discovery's computers. T-minus 31 seconds. The handoff has occurred. Discovery's computers now controlling.
25.
Firing chain is armed.
20.
Sound suppressor water system is being activated.
15.
Brain safe systems armed. T-minus 10 seconds. Go for main engine start. 7, 6, 5. 3 engines up and burning. 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery, beginning America's new journey to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And the vehicle has cleared the tower.
The Space Shuttle Discovery on its way. This is a critical period of time, 8.5 minutes of, well, a lot of violence, you might say, to get them to space. What's it like now on board there?
Right now they're feeling a lot of shaking on board the flight deck. They're about to go supersonic, and you'll hear the call to throttle down, which is when they're going through max aerodynamic pressure. And you'll hear the vehicle, and behind us it's just roaring inside the solid rocket boosters, and you can feel that on board the shuttle inside. And you can see on the outside of the vehicle, the shocks are forming right now as they're going supersonic.
Those are actually called shock collars, and that occurs, it basically makes the water vapor condense as it goes through at supersonic speeds, right?
Exactly. In fact, they're forming the shocks and they're continuing to accelerate until we'll hit about 5 times the speed of sound when about 2 minutes when we kick off the solid rocket boosters.
Discovery Houston, go at throttle up.
Discovery, just go with throttle.
All
Sounds like
systems
Eileen
remain
is
go
getting...
for Discovery. Altitude now 9 miles.
Eileen is getting rattled around a little bit there as we hear the famous go with throttle up call.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they're go with throttle up, and here for about another less than a minute, we're going to have the solid rocket boosters kick off, and then they'll...
That's a key point. We should point out that once you light those solid rocket boosters, there's no turning them off. And that first couple of minutes is very critical because there aren't many abort scenarios that work in that situation. There are none.
Exactly. In fact, we're pretty much along for the ride for that first 2 minutes and 17 seconds on the solid rocket boosters. Everything happens pretty quick after that for the next 6.5 minutes on the 3-man engines as we continue to accelerate uphill, as they will today, until you hit orbital velocity here at 8.5 minutes at 17,500 miles an hour.
Right at 2 minutes, we should see those solid rocket boosters drop off. You'll see a little flare. Off they go, like tossing a couple of cigarettes out of a fast-moving car.
Booster officer confirms.
And that's a good moment. You do.
Absolutely.
We used to all breathe a sigh of relief at that moment because, of course, we thought of Challenger.
Speed now 3,030 miles per hour. Altitude 33 miles. 40 miles.
Not bad.
Downrange.
40 miles of altitude in 2.5 minutes. That's not bad. I'd say that's a decent performance. But nevertheless, there's still a lot of peril here because you've got another 6 minutes of powered flight. What's going on now?
Right now, everything is smoothed out on the flight deck. So all the vibration that they had on the solid rocket boosters has now gone away, and they're now waiting for the next calls, which will be a negative return call, which means they're through the RTLS capability.
2 engines, Zaragoza.
Now they're picking up the 2-engine TAL calls.
Which means you lose 2 engines, you can make it to Spain.
If
right?
you lose 1 engine, you can make it on the 2 remaining engines to Spain.
Okay.
All systems in good condition. Altitude now 254,000 feet, or about 48 miles. Discovery speed 4,500 miles per hour. 85 miles northeast of the Kennedy Space Center.
You're listening to the voice of James Hartsfield, who is in Houston at Public Affairs officer there, sitting in Mission Control. The same man who brought us the terrible news about the loss of Columbia 2.5 years ago. This picture is really designed for engineers to make sure they don't see debris, but it's an awful lot of fun for us to kind of go along for the ride, isn't it?
Absolutely. You're looking from the top of the tank down the belly of the orbiter, and they're sticking out of the right side, or the left side as you're looking at it, is the right wing of the orbiter Discovery. And you can see the edge of the Earth in the background there.
Back down to the ground here, the flag's still flapping ever so nicely, and about 3 minutes or so into the mission. Where are we on the potential abort scenarios now?
Right now we're still in the 2-engine TAL, and we got the negative return call, which means they won't come back to Kennedy Space Center for anything that happens now. They'll continue on across the ocean.
Landing at the Kennedy Space Center that were required. All systems remain go for Discovery.
Altitude and speed are their friend now, and each bit of it that they gain, they get another option, another possibility, another place to go if something should go wrong. And in about 20 seconds, they're basically in a scenario where they could make an abort to orbit, right?
Exactly. Anything that happens here, as you said, in about 12 seconds, we're going to be pressed to ATO. In other words, if anything happens, they continue on to orbit.
And this is where astronauts say all that simulation, all that training, never had to use it.
Absolutely, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing. You say, I've heard this portion of the launch called the electric ride because it's almost like riding a smooth train or something. Is it really like that?
It really is. It's very, very smooth. Once you come off the solid rocket boosters, it is very, very smooth on the 3-main engines. In the last 2 minutes, they'll be feeling the force of 3 times the force of gravity through their chests as they're doing the final accelerations. And there's our press to ATO call, which means that they could lose an engine at this point, and they'll continue on to orbit.
Discovery could reach a lower than planned but safe orbit on only 2 engines if needed. All 3 engines continue to operate well at full throttle. Speed now 8,000 miles per hour. Altitude 67 miles, 300 miles northeast of the Kennedy Space Center.
Is that a moment where you breathe a sigh of relief, or do you wait until the main engine cutoff comes up?
Well, of course, you're waiting for main engine cutoff, but the rookies, Soichi and Charlie, have passed the magic 60-mile mark, so they are now true astronauts in the
They're now officially astronauts. I suppose they put the astronaut pin on a little later, right?
When they come home, yeah, there'll be a ceremony for that.
Look at this great picture here as we see the sun shining on the belly of Discovery there. And like we said, this camera was put in direct response to the debris strike which occurred in Columbia, but gives us a wonderful sense of where they are. You see the Earth beneath as they make their way into space. I didn't get the altitude call just a moment ago, but they've gone a long way in a short period of time.
And single engine Zaragoza 104.
And single engine Zaragoza 104.
Those calls that Discovery could reach its planned orbit on only 2 engines if needed. All 3 continue to operate well at full throttle. Just under 2 minutes to cut off of the main engines now.
Discovery Houston, we see a nominal shutdown plan. You will be go for the plus X and go for the pitch maneuver.
All right, translate that for us, plus X in the pitch maneuver.
And what they're going to do is when they release the tank, one of the things they want to do is get photographs of the tank on orbit. So they'll do a pitch maneuver, they'll plus X away, and then basically shove themselves forward from the tank, pitch up, and then they'll take photographs from the shuttle.
There's a pretty good chance we're going to see that, right? Is that possible, or will that camera still be recording at that point?
At that point, we may lose the signal, but we're getting a great signal right now of the vehicle in the roll. The heads up, you can see the Earth's limb in the background back there.
That was the heads-up roll, because what they do is most of the ascent, they're kind of, you might call it upside down, but it doesn't feel like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're in your seat, so you don't really feel the sensation of being upside down. But you can certainly see it out the windows and on the instrumentation inside the cockpit.
Engines are now beginning to throttle back to prevent the spacecraft from experiencing
you
forces
see
in excess.
Launch pad 39B. The only thing more pretty to NASA than a shuttle on the pad is that site, an empty launch pad 2.5 years later, and what appears to be a flawless ascent to orbit.
700 miles northeast of the Kennedy Space Center. 30 seconds to cut off of the main engines.
And as we say, that cutoff of the main engine, 8 minutes and 30 seconds in, which gets them into space and gets them on their way. That was the moment when astronauts used to breathe a sigh of relief. Columbia taught us something different, didn't it?
Exactly, and that you can never relax your guard on this endeavor, because we have very close margins.
Well, it's interesting, you know, if you think about all the force we just witnessed and felt here, and our bones were rattling. I don't know if it's not something that comes across well on television, that sense of raw power, but that power has to be dissipated somehow, and that's what re-entry is, after all, dissipation of that power, so you can understand the tremendous heat that is involved in all of that.
By now for jettison of the external fuel tank.
I think we're going to see this live, which is extraordinary.
They've just gone through main engine cutoffs, so the main engines have now shut down. Those guys are in 0G.
Look at that.
And
there goes
the tank.
Discovery and the tank. Part their ways. The tank will make its way.
Live television as Discovery jettisons its
That's
external
spectacular.
fuel tank.
The tank will be.
All normal with the cutoff of Discovery's main engines.
You can see the jets firing. The jets firing to do just what we saw there.
Ensure clean separation from the tank.
We have a good plus-X maneuver.
Copy the
And they'll
good
pitch
plus
over
X
now and
because
look
we
back
saw
at the
a
tank
nominal
and take some
MECO.
photographs.
One is not required.
And that's a great call. That OMS one not required indicates they're in a good orbit and a good circular orbit.
He's talking about the orbital maneuvering system, which are rockets that do significant changes in your orbit, and if you don't need to use it, that means that you've had a great launch, essentially, and that's good news. Seeing that separation, that was spectacular. That was something.
It's the first time we've ever seen that.
Yeah, we didn't expect we would have that live capability all the way there, but the external fuel tank now makes its way toward a controlled entry into the Indian Ocean. It breaks up, most of it burns up, little tiny pieces fall into the Indian Ocean. It's the only significant piece of the shuttle that is not reused. Those solid rocket boosters that you saw that came off 2 minutes in, they have parachutes attached. They go into the ocean. They're fished out by some boats that bring them back. It takes them a little while to get them back, but they're ultimately reconditioned, restacked, and reused. Well, spectacular launch. Jim Riley, you did a good job, and we are not done here. We're going to come back in just a little bit, and we're going to resume our conversation about NASA, about this mission. We'll take another look at that spectacular launch. Look at them, they're putting their coats on and saying, all in a day's work here at the Launch Control Center and the firing room here at the Kennedy Space Center. Back with more special coverage in just a moment.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery, beginning America's new journey to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And the vehicle has cleared the tower.
Discovery.
Houston's now controlling. Commander Oliver Collins confirmed the Discovery.
CNN Tonight. Jeff Corwin risking his life to put the wild in wildlife TV.
Try to carefully.
Larry King Live, CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Hi, I'm John Scheer, CEO and founder of Video Professor. You know, after teaching people how to operate their computers for over 15 years now, I'm amazed that there are still people that don't have computer skills, like Windows, word processing, the internet, and email. If you're looking for that new job, or maybe it's just balancing your budget, or even helping your kids with homework, these aren't handy skills to have, these are essential. If you're having trouble learning the computer, I'm going to help you out with a free learning lesson of your choice from Video Professor. Let me show you how simple this is. You put the CD in your CD drive. The lesson plays just like a video on your computer screen. The best part about this offer, this is free. You just pay a small shipping and processing charge, and I'll even refund that if you're not satisfied with my product. It's free, the risk is free, so what do you got to lose? Try my product.
To get your free computer learning CD, you must call now. Call 1-800-430-7128.
I heard there's this thing called the DirecTV Movers Connection. They install your DirecTV service in your new home when you move, and it's free.
Free? I wouldn't mind moving.
This place is nice.
Movers Connection, only from DirecTV. Another example of how DirecTV is rethinking the way television should be.
What does DirecTV DVR with TiVo mean to you?
Awesome quality.
You don't have to choose between your favorite shows anymore.
DirecTV with TiVo will find your favorite shows.
It records the show
while I'm gone.
For the whole season.
Click, you record, and you're done.
It's that easy.
I can watch it then, I can watch it later. It's fabulous.
It puts you in control. The other thing I love, the wish list.
It's like a search engine. Any program, favorite actor, favorite director.
It'll find so many options. It's awesome.
DirecTV DVR. Call 1-866-GET-A-DVR for this special offer.
Bringing you the world for 25 years, this is CNN.
With Sprint, people are experiencing BMW in a whole new way. Using wireless kiosks powered by Sprint, customers can build their own all-new 3 Series and ask for a test drive. Because the more new people BMW reaches, the more BMWs wind up on the road. With Sprint, BMW is accessible, interactive, beautiful. Learn more at sprint.com.
Actually thinking about it, probably
this was the scene just a few moments ago as the Space Shuttle Discovery and her external fuel tank parted company about 160 nautical miles above the planet's surface. What a spectacular shot. We weren't sure we were going to see that live up until the bitter end there. That shot is there to help engineers make sure there's no debris that fell off that tank causing a problem to the orbiter itself, but it sure served a nice public relations factor as well. That was a fun shot to watch. Joining us once again, Lou Dobbs and Lori Garver. Lou, that was a fun launch to watch, being able to see it like we just did. But the serious business, the serious business behind all of this is really what's next for NASA. Lots of talk about retiring the shuttle fleet. Lots of talk about a new generation of vehicles. Lots of talk about how NASA does business. It's a lot for the agency to handle right now. You think they're up to it?
I do think they're up to it. I have to be honest with you, Miles, after watching the external tank separate with the orbiter and to see those amazing pictures as the orbiter fired its engines, I mean, that's just breathtaking. The thrill of a launch is always amazing, but that was just an incredible added bonus, and we appreciate you bringing it to us. The direction for NASA now is clarifying a bit. We've gone through, as you know, Miles, 3 administrators for NASA, a beleaguered agency to begin with, in less than 4 years. 3. It was an unsettled organization before Columbia. It was a bureaucracy. As I was saying earlier, Walter Wriston used to say that a bureaucracy is a state of mind, and that state of mind gripped NASA. I have not, and I don't know what your experience has been, but I have not heard so much excitement and just optimism as surrounds an administrator who has been there just about 3 months. Dr. Michael Griffin is just being received with open arms by the great professionals of NASA. You heard George Diller say with the launch of Discovery, on to the moon, Mars, and beyond, and that is the mission for NASA. It's a clear statement. The days of when Dan Golden was administrator of cheaper, better, faster, it looks like we have the hope that it will be better and farther and that this country is once again willing to invest in our space program. The wonderful professionals, and you know them, Miles, at NASA, have been beset by budget constraints, by often awkward and conflicting missions. It looks like Michael Griffin and President Bush, to his credit, are bringing direction again to NASA. Now the question will be, will Congress support the budget and move us ahead, whether it is an orbital space plane, whether it be an extension of Shuttle, or perhaps another derivation of a space vehicle? We hope to hear the outlines soon, but we're behind on schedule with the International Space Station now by more than a year. We've been dependent upon Proton and Soyuz, the Russians, to supply Alpha, and we now need, and it looks like we could expect the shuttle to take up its part in restoring the International Space Station, resupplying, and getting us ready to build that platform to move ahead to the moon. So I, for one, think there is great reason for the people of NASA, for all of us, to be optimistic about where NASA is now heading.
Lori Garver, do you share that optimism? Because one of the big concerns that I hear from the rank and file here is as NASA marches toward retiring the shuttle fleet by 2010, maybe 15 missions, maybe less, there's some concern there'll be this down period when there are no flights and they lose a lot of good people. Is that a big concern?
Well, there's an interesting dilemma NASA finds itself in. Here we are on this great day of returning the shuttle to flight. We announce, as Lou just said, that we're going back to the moon, onto Mars and beyond. But in order to do that, we have to retire the very vehicle that is taking us on this exciting mission today. A lot has been made of retiring the shuttle, of what will follow it, and this gap between having human spaceflight. I guess in my view, we've just had a 2.5-year gap in human spaceflight, and keep in mind that we had Americans 100% of that time on the International Space Station, thanks to our partners, the Russians. So to me, I think it's probably more important that we move on to develop new vehicles with new technology beyond these next 15 or so space shuttle flights, even if there is a gap between the time when U.S. can launch humans in space.
All right, Lori Garver and Lou Dobbs, thank you very much. We're going to be back with more. We'll button things up with Jim Riley, and we'll tell you why they're eating beans right now in the Launch Control Center. Stay with us.
This is a view from a cameraman with this
Denture wearers, we stained a string of pearls in barbecue sauce, not just to prove the stain-removing strength of Efferdent Plus or the freshening power of its Listerine ingredients, but to give every denture wearer the confidence to show those pearly whites. The confident clean of Efferdent Plus.
He's at the door. Get ready.
Are you a homeowner with too many bills? Refinance now with no out-of-pocket closing costs. Log on or call 1-800-65-DITECH.
Looking for a better hotel bed? Introducing the Sleep Number bed, exclusively at Radisson. Now you can adjust your bed's firmness and comfort for a perfect night's sleep. Radisson Hotels and Resorts. Stay your own way.
One of the most advanced assembly plants in America is now open. A $1.1 billion investment designed to deliver the next generation of Hyundais and thousands of new jobs. It's here that everything we know about quality and reliability will find its way into every car we build, beginning with the totally new 2006 Sonata. A Hyundai like you've never seen before.
Judge John Roberts was unanimously approved by the Senate to be a federal judge. Top of his class at Harvard Law, John Roberts served 2 presidents and argued 39 cases before the Supreme Court. He was awarded the ABA's highest rating. Colleagues call him brilliant and praise his integrity and fair-mindedness. Now President Bush has nominated Roberts for the Supreme Court. Shouldn't a fair judge be treated fairly? Urge the Senate to give John Roberts a fair up or down vote.
At Prudential Real Estate, we've teamed up with Yahoo to create a more powerful way to find a home. Yahoo Real Estate connects you to Prudential Real Estate offices with more than 1 million properties online and markets from coast to coast. You'll find more facts and photos to help you explore the properties you like. And when you're ready, you're one click away from a Prudential Real Estate sales professional who can make home buying and selling a snap. Prudential Real Estate and Yahoo together, the perfect way to find the perfect home.
Closed captioning hours on CNN, sponsored in part by Post, whole grain experts for over 100 years.
Where can you get a whole day's worth of whole grain in just one bowl? Post-shredded wheat, 100% whole grain.
In the Launch Control Center, there's an old tradition. After a successful launch, they eat beans. Why?
That's true. It goes way back. I'm not sure exactly what their tradition is, but after every successful launch, they all adjourn to the lobby, and they're all eating beans right now.
There was a launch director, I think, way back, who had a bean fetish, and apparently there was some good luck associated with all that. I assume these beans will be savored as much as any plate of beans ever eaten by this team.
Probably so. There's been a long time between this plate of beans and the last ones those guys have had.
Your thoughts 2.5 years later, after all we've witnessed, the tragedy of Columbia to the triumph of the last few moments we saw here.
We're better off than we were, fortunately, and today's demonstration of what looks to be a flawless launch is just one more indication that we're back in space and we're going to stay.
They're back in space, and of course they'll be spending a lot of time making sure they have a nice, safe vehicle, and we'll be tracking that every step of the way. We got a 12-day mission ahead, and of course CNN remains the place to stay up to date on it. For now, that's it for us on our special expanded edition of American Morning. I'm Miles O'Brien, live at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's send it over to Betty Nguyen in Atlanta. Betty.
What an exciting day, Miles. Thanks for taking us along for the ride. Let's see that shuttle launch one more time, now in the news. The Space Shuttle Discovery blast off from Florida amid blue skies and balmy weather. You just watched Discovery lift off from the Kennedy Space Center just about 20 minutes ago. Here's another shot of that. Look at it. It is the first shuttle mission since the 2003 Columbia disaster, and we will have much more on the historic return to space straight ahead. Meanwhile, White House officials say they'll release some, but not all, of Judge John Roberts' papers from 2 GOP administrations. Roberts is President Bush's pick for the Supreme Court vacancy. Officials are refusing to release documents from Roberts' work in the Solicitor General's office. Now, that was during the first President Bush's term. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee haven't said which documents they'll ask for. Boy Scout officials say an unseen power line is to blame for yesterday's deaths of 4 leaders at the National Jamboree gathering. Apparently, they were helping to pitch a tent when a large pole touched the electric line. 3 other adults were injured, but no Boy Scouts. Grief counselors are on hand today. The family of Natalie Holloway has posted a $1 million reward for her safe return. Holloway's mother says a group of friends came forward with more money to raise the previous reward amount. Now, a $100,000 reward is also being offered for information leading to Holloway's remains. Natalie Holloway has now been missing for nearly 2 months. Good morning and welcome to CNN Live today. It is 10 a.m. in Houston, Texas, 11 a.m. at the Kennedy Space Center, and 11 p.m. in Beijing. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Betty Nguyen in for Darren Kagan. Up first this hour, the return to space for Shuttle Discovery. Discovery blasted off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida about 20 minutes ago on the first mission since the Columbia tragedy.
T-minus 10 seconds. Go for main engine start. 7, 6, 5. 3 engines up and burning. 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery, beginning America's new journey to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And the vehicle has cleared the tower.
American Morning anchor and CNN space correspondent Miles O'Brien has been covering the shuttle's return all morning long, and he joins us now from the Kennedy Space Center. What a spectacular sight. You know, Miles, I could watch that over and over again.
It's a lot of fun. It's all the more thrilling to be here. Sometime you ought to come down and join us for a launch, Betty. It really is something. The 114th mission of the Space Shuttle program is underway. The 31st mission for the Space Shuttle Discovery, which has had some storied missions in its past. The previous return to flight after Challenger, the deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope, the ride to space for John Glenn on the Space Shuttle back in 1998, and now another return to flight. Commander Eileen Collins, her crew of 6, are up there now, already streaking across Europe, if you can believe it, now about 25 minutes into this mission, turning what was a rocket ship into now a spacecraft, which it will be for the next 12 days as they begin the process of playing catch-up with the International Space Station. that docking coming soon, and in the process of getting to it, they will spend an awful lot of time doing some things that have never been done on space shuttle missions before. They will spend a lot of time looking at the outer shell of the Space Shuttle Discovery, looking beneath in the belly, the leading edge of the wings, the nose cone, to ensure that no damage occurred. As you can see, as they went up, there are additional cameras on board that external fuel tank. They took additional pictures of the tank itself before it fell toward the Indian Ocean. All of this with a mind toward Columbia, which, as you remember, about 80 seconds after launch, January of 2003, a piece of foam struck the leading edge of the wing. It was a fatal breach that ultimately led to the breakup of the vehicle and the loss of the crew 16 days later. The primary mission here is to get back into flight, to learn ways to look for damage on an orbiter, to test out some ideas for fixing damage should it be found, but also to get to the International Space Station, give it some much needed supplies. Among the top priority items, an important thing called the control moment gyro, which is what keeps the space station in its proper orientation, flying straight and level, if you will, as it orbits around the Earth. They've had some failures on those gyroscopes, and so that gyroscope will be added on as part of this mission. In addition, all kinds of supplies will be brought on board. The space station, without the shuttle for the past 2.5 years, has been wanting for supplies, and this mission comes really none too soon. On board the orbiter, they're getting used to being in space. Sometimes that requires a little of adaptation. If astronauts are honest with you, sometimes that can cause a little mal to space. And that's why they spend not too much time doing too much work on this first day. They'll do get a few things ready, begin that survey of the exterior, and then pretty much head to sleep, which I'm told by astronauts sleeping in space is some of the best sleep you'll ever get, Betty. But nevertheless, they have a full mission ahead of them, and NASA here and on the ground, obviously it's a big day. Take a look at what some employees who were on the compound here today, what they did as they witnessed this launch. This is what they live for here. They've had 2.5 years of hard work getting Discovery ready, and this moment is what really keeps them going. These are passionate professionals who do everything they can to make this moment safe for the crew on board, always aware of the risks involved, and this is the moment they've been waiting for, and for that matter, the moment NASA has been waiting for. This really marks, Betty, the beginning of the end of the Space Shuttle program. Probably 15 more flights of retirement by 2010, and then on to other destinations, the Moon and Mars, another kind of vehicle, as you look at those remarkable pictures of Discovery and the external fuel tank parting. And so there's a bit of nostalgia here as well, because they know it is the beginning of an end of an era. Betty?
And you know, we saw those smiles from those NASA employees, but I think, Miles, for that first couple of minutes when it took off, everyone was on the edge of their seats holding their breath. Did you feel that collective sigh of relief once you knew that everything was in the clear?
I didn't breathe for the first 2 minutes, that's for sure, and I always get a pit in my stomach at that moment, and in particular, those first 2 minutes when those solid rocket boosters are attached and there is no escape for the crew. You know, if you go back to the Apollo era, to the Mercury era, the Gemini flights, the crew always had a way of getting out at any point along the way, but there is no crew escape system for the shuttle. This is, you know, historically been one of the biggest flaws in this system. It is very risky because there is no crew escape, and particularly that first 2 minutes when those solid rocket boosters are blaring, they have no options for an abort scenario. After you get rid of those solid rocket boosters, suddenly the options begin to open up. You can glide to a landing at various places, either back here or across the Atlantic or wherever the case may be. And so I always hold my breath, and I think anybody who understands the risks involved in all this does as well. Betty?
Just remarkable to watch. Thank you, Miles. And you can log on to our website for more on Discovery. You can follow a play-by-play account of the launch through Miles O'Brien's Shuttle blog at CNN.com.